Countless people from Martin and Malcolm to Tutu and William Bell have argued that civil rights is not enough, that we must recognize human rights for all. With the encouragement and assistance of the mayor's office, the Birmingham Human Rights Task Force was created to make Birmingham a leader in the goal of securing human rights for all who live, work, and visit here. This afternoon, because he came and he said that human rights is not enough, that we need to look at, civil rights is not enough, we need to actually look at and examine human rights in order to move forward, that all people will be created equally with dignity. And so I'd like to introduce to you the Honorable William A. Bell, Sr., the Mayor of the City of Birmingham.
Now, civil rights. Civil rights is an effort of mankind to codify human rights, to say that, okay, we're going to protect these certain rights. Now, how can we keep someone from abusing someone else's human rights? Well, you got to figure out a way to put it in a law to make sure that everyone knows these are the laws, and this is the acceptable behavior, and these are the consequences that if you don't live up to those behaviors. I recall there was a lot of efforts to balance the playing field between the races, both employment-wise. I mentioned the fact that I worked for the Xerox Corporation. They didn't hire me because they looked at me and saw that I would become a top-notch salesperson. They had a number of federal government contracts because the federal government had passed laws saying that they would not do business with anyone unless they had a minority hiring program, that they weren't going to get contracts. So they looked out all across the world, and if you were black and you could put two words together to make a sentence, they brought you on board. So I know how I got there to the Xerox Corporation. But they had to treat me a certain way because the law said they had to treat me a certain way. And then there were other laws passed about when the schools would be segregated, when the universities would be segregated. It wasn't just enough that a black student, Arthurine Lucy or James Hood, could go to school at those institutions. What's the selection process? What's the scholarship process? And a lot of laws were put in place to try to level the playing field. I recall in, I think it was '67, the Bakke versus the University of California system, in which, while there were laws passed that said that universities and colleges had to accept all races of individuals, and you had to make a conscientious effort to recruit minorities because of their past discrimination of not being allowed to go to school there. Well, the Bakke case was the first case in which they said, let's start peeling back or rolling back some of the codification of laws that say, we're going to treat people fairly, give people an opportunity if you didn't have that opportunity before. And when you saw it on the surface, I was in high school, I said, oh, that'll never happen because we've come too far. But then in the state of California, it did happen. They said you couldn't use race as a determinant to allow somebody to go to school at the University of California system. Then gradually, those things that were passed, codification was being challenged at all different levels because it was a codification of civil laws to make sure that people had their human rights intact and preserved. But then I always say, if someone can give you something, then they can also take it away. The only person that can take away, the only entity that can take away your human rights is God. No one can take away your human rights. But when it comes down to civil rights, where you got state legislators, you got city councils and mayors, you got the Congress and the president. You know, if they give something, then somebody else can come and take it back. Good example. The Voters' Rights Act.
Right.
You know, it set up the laws that said that in the South and in those previous Confederate states that had segregationist laws, that you cannot discriminate based on voting. And any voting change that you have in your community or any laws that are passed by your state legislature has to be reviewed by the Justice Department before it can be enacted or before you can make those changes. It was a civil law to make sure that everyone had the right as a human to be treated equally. There's been a constant effort to turn that back and to roll that back. And I was a primary example. I told you I'm a Forrest Gump on a lot of things. And you remember when I ran for county commission, and the governor of the state had appointed General Bowman. And General Bowman's a good man. I'm not throwing any casting any aspersion on him one way or the other. But when I turned around and ran for that position, he appointed General Bowman for a period of time, and then an election came up, and I applied to run for it and won. Well, the governor challenged my winning that election, and we had court cases, both over here at the county, down in Montgomery, and it went all the way to the Supreme Court. A lot of people don't know that that case went all the way to the Supreme Court. And I wonder, why would the governor be so concerned about little old William Bell taking a seat on the county commission? You know, I hadn't met the governor before, and you know, wasn't a friend or wasn't an enemy, so why would he be so concerned with me? When I listened to the hearing at the Supreme Court, it wasn't about William Bell. It wasn't about the county commission. It wasn't about General Bowman. What it was about was states' rights to bypass the Justice Department in changing election laws and rules. They had a law change to give the governor the power to appoint without having an election that person could sit there as long as that term would last, whether it was 3 years, 2 years, 2 days, or 4 years. That person could sit there just based on the governor's appointment. Well, that law never went to the Justice Department to be confirmed, so you would have someone there representing the people who was appointed by one person, the governor. Well, the governor was challenging the 1965 Voters' Rights Act, saying that governors and their administration did not come under the rule of the 1965 Voters' Rights Act. It also stated that if the legislature passed a bill or law giving the governor the power, that also did not come under the 65 Voters' Rights Act, because it was the relationship between the governor and the legislature, and not the legislature and the people. So I'm saying all of this to say, when you have civil rights, it's not enough.
Right. Because
people can always change. People can have, I think it came up that they had to reauthorize the Voters' Rights Act from Ronald Reagan because it was only for 25 years. Well, how can a voter's right, can we have about the right to vote for 25 years? Now, they passed it, but the idea that it was only for 25 years, and I never knew that. I thought, okay, I got the right to vote. I don't have to know how many bubbles in a bar of soap or how many hairs on my head or any of that stuff, because as an American, I got the right to vote, and that's it. Well, it only lasted for 25 years. So civil rights is at the whim of man and woman in the legislative process. Human rights is God-given. And nobody, no country, no king, no president, no legislative body, nobody can take away those human rights. Now, they can tell you how you conduct yourself as it relates to expression of those human rights. That if someone interferes with your ability to carry out your human rights or live under your human rights, there should be penalties for that. But we have some people that don't understand that. They challenge the order of the way things are. And I think that was seen by this last election. What a lot of people have a hard time wrapping their heads around is that the landscape is changing as to who we are as Americans. The landscape is changing as to who controls America. It's not just white males who sit in decision, but it's all of us who sit in decision. And all of us should have the opportunity to come to the table. So I'm saying all of that to say that Birmingham and its history is rooted in the human rights movement. In fact, before there was an SCLC, it was the Alabama Christian Movement for Human Rights that was started by Fred Shuttlesworth after the NAACP had been shut down by Governor Patterson. So we are so rooted in that. But now it's time for us to take our rightful place on the international stage, because I know oftentimes we look at stuff right in Birmingham, whether we talk about the homeless and human rights for the homeless, whether we talk about shutting down Cooper Green Hospital and the impact that it will have on black folks. But just as many white folks are going to be impacted by Cooper Green shutting down as black folks, just as many Hispanics are going to be impacted by it. It's a human rights issue. But we also have to look beyond just what's happening here and look at what's happening in the rest of the world. What's happening with sex trade that's going on, placing people in human bondage. Slavery still exists. Right. It wasn't abolished by Lincoln. Slavery still exists in the world. What is it that we can do in this community to tell people that, yes, you may think it's hopeless now when you have bombings in Kandahar, or you may think it's hopeless now when you can't get a job in Cairo, or you may think it's hopeless now with bombs going off in Iraq or Egypt or Libya, places like that. But we had bombs going off right here in Birmingham. We had murders taking place right here in Birmingham. But because good men and good women came together to say that we will stand united to make a change. Change did come. Are we perfect? No. We're a lot better off than we were before. And we have a story to tell. And what I hope this body and the Peace Project will do is to reach out to other entities across the world and say, come here to Birmingham and let's sit down and talk about how we made a change here and how we can continue to make positive change for human rights and have discussions with our brothers and sisters who live in other lands to get them to understand it's not about my religion that gives me human rights. You can be Muslim, you can be Jew, you can be Christian, you can be Catholic, you can be Baptist, you can be AME, Episcopalian. That's not it. It's about what God, or Allah, or that supreme being has given to all of us to say we have dignity, we have work, and we should be treated accordingly. So I'll close here by saying keep up the work, because as positive change occurs, there's always negative forces that are trying to overcome those positive changes, just as I told you before. If someone can give you a law to make your life better, someone can also remove that law or put in place another law that can make it worse. You must always be vigilant. So please be vigilant. Please keep up the work, and thank you for your dedication. Thank you.